So here's the ramp getting up to 81 North. We're going up at 81 North. Not to be confused with North and South Carolina. Remind me to check the tire pressure on my back. The tire pressure. I went through so much tire, I want to make sure it didn't damage my tire. Because if you ride over some tire, it can make the tire so hot, the tire come off there because of the tire. And that's the difference between a tire and a tire. You put tire on the road when you're making it with the asphalt. You put a tire on your motorcycle when you want to go riding. And if you ride over the tire with your tire, probably one of those reasons why my parents wanted me to speak clearly, because they're so. I said it's probably one of those reasons my parents wanted me to speak clearly, because there's so many words that people say that sound similar, you know, like if you say fire, like there was a fire, but you say you're going to go a long ways, you might be saying you're going to go far. So fire, you know, fire and far is what those words are. They're not far and fire, they're far and fire. And it's tar and tire, not tar and tar. You know what I mean, or know what I mean? But I do remember my parents used to correct me all the time. Uncle Jim never really was one much to correct me or anything, but my grandma used to. She'd say, "You gonna go out to the barn and feed the horses?" And I'd go, "Uh-huh." She'd look at me and ask if it meant the same thing as yes. And I'm sure it's like that same no matter where you live in the United States. You know, kids will go, you know, especially if you're older, because when you were a kid, everybody did that all over the country. They'd go, and then Gordy, you know, people hear me say it, and they're like, "You trying to steal that from Mr. G 1965? And I'm like, "God, what are you, 12 years old? Don't you know that people at my age or his age, everybody when we were kids would say and you know? You even not watch TV from back in those days? Or it's like Doyle says, how's your mom and them? You know? Hey Doyle, how's your mom and them? It's like people all over the country say that, you know? It's like you say it to all these people that are younger that don't know, and they think that it's like, you know, you're trying to steal Doyle's catchphrase or so-and-so's catchphrase. And it's like, well, I'm glad they got a catchphrase, but they're not the only ones who go, In fact, I think I filled it out or did that one time with Gordy. I said something, and he said, and then I made a joke saying something like, "Is that the truth?" And we looked at each other, started laughing, and we both kind of went, Isn't that right? Yeah. That's right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I just leave that alone.
You think anybody believe that? It's just a lot of stuff in English. Just depends on where you grew up, what your parents were like, whether they wanted you to speak clear or not, what kind of school you went to. I mean, I've heard people back in East Tennessee, like when I go ride up in the mountains and stuff, you come to some of those little communities where people can't even afford a front door. They got a big couple of thick blankets sewn together going over what should be the door. And it's like, man, you get a bear coming in there, and it's like, wake up and you have a bear in your house. But I've heard some of them talk, but it's so heavy that you can't even understand them, you know? Wonder what that place is. There's a plane out there, and I wonder what that thing is. Looks like tanker. I wonder if it's some kind of crop dusting place or something, or Wythe County. Wythe County. And that right? It's W-Y-T-H-E. It's Wythe County. Wythe County. That, or it's a Wise County with a hair lip. Wythe County. Boogada. Look. It looked, yeah, that's the same thing I was just thinking. That's funny. I was just going to say it looked like a patchwork quilt or whatever they call them, you know? There's a deer on the side of the road to the right. See it? Yeah, I get a kick out of city folks. That thing there said rural retreat. And a lot of city people, they laugh at us country, you know, more country folk, you know? And it's like, yet I've never heard of a city retreat. When people want to go to a retreat, they go to a rural retreat, you know? So they laugh at us, and then they want to go country anyway when they want to retreat. But nobody retreats to the city. It's like if everything started going crazy in America, people wouldn't want to be living in the city because you'd be hard pressed to find, you know, water and food and whatever, you know, especially in a liberal city where you're limited on where you can find firearms, you know. Everybody wants to be out in the country because at least you'd have a better chance at survival if you knew how to survive. You know, it's like if you had nothing else but some animal, you know, that you could shoot and get some hair and tie some hair strands together to make a, like end to end to make a fishing line. You could whittle a fish hook. You know, you could survive it if you had to. But in the city, I mean, the water's so contaminated, I wouldn't want to eat anything out of there anyway. I mean, I would if I was starving to death, but, you know, there'd be so many people trying to get food out of there, you know. I mean, I could see how, you know, I like the creativity of stuff like The Walking Dead and all that, you know. I know that there are certain plants that can make you get like in a hypnotic state, and I doubt if you could make a virus that'll reanimate people, especially if they're all like rotted like that. That's not biologically sound or whatever to be, you know, half almost all your skin and flesh and everything's gone, but you're still moving and want brains. Your brains are all rotted, so how could you even function? But I like creative science fiction stuff, you know, and but it's like, you know, if something like that broke out in the city and people are struggling to find food and water, you know, you wouldn't want to be in the city because whatever's affecting them is going to affect you. And if all of a sudden there was no more transportation and no more trucks bringing stuff in, food, you know, bringing food in, if you look how crazy people go when there's a toilet paper, you know, a dash for toilet paper, it's like, man, are you kidding me? You know, give the trucks time to get there. You'll get your butt wiped. Don't worry about it, you know. But it's like, if there is no more gas and no more diesel, no more trucks, you know, no way of getting anything to you, can you imagine the mass hysteria and people want to like steal each other's food and all that kind of stuff. And in the liberal cities, there's not very many people that are armed anyway, and the ones with arms would be the one who win and get the food, right? But if you live out in the country, or you know how to survive, you know, you can set up traps and whatever and eat rabbits and deer up in there. There was a couple deer up in there. Yeah, there was a break in the trees going up, and there was deer up in there. There's another one right by the road. Watch it. Right up on the side of the road.